The coffee hit the marble floor before anyone screamed. 1 second, Audrey Sinclair was carrying a tray of 4 cappuccinos across the polished expanse of the Meridian Club's main floor. The next, a hand shot out from table 12, not to catch her, not to warn her, just to gesture, wide and careless, the way people do when they've never had to think about the people serving them. The ceramic cups didn't shatter, they just cracked. A small, almost dignified collapse as the coffee bled out across the white marble like something irreversible had just happened. Which, as it turned out, it had. "Are you serious right now?" The voice belonged to Charlotte Vane. Audrey had served her twice before and knew 2 things about her. She wore perfume that cost more than Audrey's rent, and she had never once said thank you. Charlotte was standing now, her cream silk blouse soaked through at the hem, her face cycling through fury with the speed of someone who had never been required to control it. "Do you have any idea what this is? This is Giambattista Valley. This is not something you don't just ruin this. I'm so sorry, Miss Vane. I'll get something to clean that immediately. Don't." Charlotte's hand came up. "Don't you dare come near me with a napkin. You people are all the same. Clumsy and cheap and completely." The slap, when it came, was open-palmed and deliberate. It wasn't an accident like the coffee. It was a choice. The crack of it silenced the room the way a gunshot would. The string quartet in the corner stopped mid-measure. Conversations died at surrounding tables. Audrey's cheek ignited. Her ears rang. She grabbed the edge of the nearest chair to keep herself upright, her vision blurring at the corners from the shock of the impact. She could feel the welt already forming. Charlotte wore a ring on her right hand, a wide-banded sapphire, and it had caught Audrey just below the cheekbone. "Don't cry. Don't you dare cry in front of these people." She heard heavy footsteps crossing the floor. Not hurried, measured. The kind of footsteps that don't rush because they've never needed to. "That's enough, Charlotte." The voice was quiet. It wasn't kind. It was the kind of quiet that made you understand immediately and instinctively that the person speaking had made louder statements with far less. Audrey looked up. He was already there. Rafferty Cole was not what people expected when they heard his name. They expected someone older, softer, the way old money sometimes runs. Instead, he was somewhere in his mid-30s, with the build of someone who had never stopped being athletic, and the face of someone who had rarely been questioned. Dark hair, jaw like a fault line, eyes that were a very specific shade of grey-green that Audrey had no time to catalogue because he was looking past her, at Charlotte, with an expression that was not anger. It was worse than anger. It was disappointment. Final and conclusive. Rafferty. Charlotte's fury flickered into something more uncertain. "She ruined my blouse. She's incompetent. You can't seriously be. I watched exactly what happened." He hadn't raised his voice by a single degree. "You moved your arm. She had nowhere to go." "That's Charlotte," he said it once. Just the name. "We're done here. We have dinner reservations. We have the Voss event on Saturday. We have nothing." The words fell like a door closing. "My driver will take you home." The silence that followed was enormous. Charlotte stared at him. Then she looked at Audrey, and the hatred in her eyes was so concentrated it had almost become something else. Something that looked, briefly, like fear. She picked up her bag, straightened her ruined blouse with 2 sharp tugs, and walked toward the exit without another word. Rafferty turned to face Audrey. He was closer than she'd expected. She resisted the urge to step back. "I'm fine." It came out steadier than she felt. "It's not. I'm okay. I just need to clean this up and get back to. Look at me." She did. Up close, his eyes were unreadable. Not cold exactly. More like a surface with a lot of depth underneath it, and no inclination to let you see how far down it went. He reached out slowly, telegraphing the movement, and tilted her chin toward the light with 2 fingers. His touch was clinical and careful. He examined the cut Charlotte's ring had left with a thoroughness that made Audrey feel like a problem being assessed. "That needs attention," he said. "It's a scratch. It's bleeding." He withdrew his hand. Then he looked across the room, where Horace Dietrich, the Meridian Club's floor manager, was already approaching with the expression of a man walking to his own execution. "Mr. Cole," Horace began, "I want you to know that this situation is absolutely—" "What's her name?" Rafferty asked. Horace blinked. Audrey. Audrey." He said it once, as if filing it somewhere. "Is she being terminated over this?" Horace's mouth opened. "Company protocol for incidents involving—" "Answer the question." "Horace, we were going to have to review. If Audrey Sinclair is not employed here when I return tomorrow morning," Rafferty said, "I will cancel the private dining contract my company has held with this club for 11 years. I'll also be calling the board chair, who, if I recall correctly, owes me a favor that neither of us has ever discussed in polite company." He let that land. "Do we understand each other?" Horace had gone the color of old chalk. "Yes, absolutely. Audrey is a valued member of our staff." Rafferty turned back to her. Get your coat. Audrey stared at him. Excuse me, you're done for the night. You need that cut looked at. I have 4 hours left on my shift. Horace will cover it. He said it without looking at Horace, with the breezy confidence of someone who had never once had a plan, interrupted by the unpredictability of another person. You're not taking the bus home with an open wound on your face. I take the bus home every night. Something moved across his expression. It wasn't quite a smile. It was more like the recognition of an obstacle he found unexpectedly interesting. Humor me, he said. 15 minutes. Let a doctor look at you. Then I'll drop you wherever you need to go. Audrey looked past him. Horace was watching with the energy of a man who desperately needed her to comply. The other servers had gathered at the service entrance, pretending not to stare. The string quartet had started playing again, something low and apologetic. She thought about the bus, the 45-minute ride back to Sunnyside, Queens, standing the whole way because it would be full at this hour. She thought about the empty bottle of antiseptic under her bathroom sink. She thought about getting home at midnight and being awake again at 5:30 to make her brother's breakfast before his first appointment. 15 minutes, she said. His car was a black Cadillac Escalade, so clean it looked like it had been manufactured specifically for this evening. The driver, a compact, watchful man he introduced only as Dell, opened the door for her without being asked. Audrey slid in, pressing herself to the far side of the leather seat, suddenly very aware of her worn uniform and her cheap flats and the streak of coffee that had dried on her forearm. Rafferty got in on the other side. He didn't fill the space the way she'd expected. He sat quietly, looking out the window at the Manhattan traffic, and didn't speak for a full minute. How long have you worked at the Meridian? He asked eventually. 8 months before that? She glanced at him sideways. Why? I'm making conversation. You don't seem like someone who makes conversation. This time the expression that crossed his face was unmistakably something warmer, though it disappeared almost as quickly as it arrived. 14-hour hospital shifts before that, Audrey said. Pediatric ward at Elmhurst. I was a patient caretech. She paused. The Meridian pays better. What made you leave? She hesitated. And then, because the question was direct and she was tired and her face hurt, she answered honestly. My brother got sick. I needed flexibility in my schedule. The night shift at the Meridian lets me be home in the mornings. Rafferty turned his head to look at her. What kind of sick? The expensive kind? She said it flatly. Not self-pity, just a fact. Congenital heart defect. He's had 2 surgeries already. The third is, she stopped. It's complicated. How old is he? She looked at him, wary now. He was watching her with that same measuring quality he'd had in the restaurant, the attention of someone who was reading something into her answers she hadn't meant to put there. 19, she said. His name is Owen, she caught herself. His name is Danny. He goes to community college when he's well enough. He wants to study civil engineering. A beat. He's good at it. He's really good at it. The car had stopped. They were in a garage. Not a hospital, not a clinic, but an underground parking structure beneath a building she didn't recognize. All clean concrete and warm lighting. This isn't an urgent care, she said. No, Rafferty agreed. It's better. The building turned out to be a private medical practice on the 38th floor of a midtown tower, a suite of rooms with the quiet efficiency of somewhere that had never once dealt with an insurance denial. A doctor materialized. Dr. Lenora Park, according to the nameplate, sharp-eyed and unhurried, and cleaned the cut on Audrey's cheek with the seriousness of someone who took small wounds as personally as large ones. Throughout the whole thing, Rafferty stood near the window with his arms crossed and said nothing. He didn't look at his phone. He just watched with that focused, measuring attention that Audrey was beginning to understand was simply how he existed in the world. You'll want to keep it dry for 48 hours, Dr. Park said, pressing a thin adhesive closure over the cut. It won't scar. She handed Audrey a small tube of cream. Twice a day, thank you, Audrey said. Dr. Park looked at Rafferty. Should I? Bill the account, he said, and add a standing credit for the children's cardiology program at Elmhurst Hospital. In her name. Audrey's head snapped up. What? No, you can't. I can, Rafferty said simply. I don't even know you. You will, he said, and there was nothing threatening in it, only the quiet certainty of a man making a statement of fact. He straightened up, buttoning his jacket. Come on, I'll take you home. The drive to Queens was long. They crossed the bridge in silence, and Audrey watched the city change outside the window. The towers receding, the streets widening and roughening, the lights becoming more ordinary. She expected him to be visibly uncomfortable with the transition. He wasn't. He sat with the same composed ease he'd had in the Meridian Club, as if the quality of the surroundings were simply irrelevant data. When Dell pulled up to her building, a 6-story brick walk-up in Sunnyside with a buzzer panel that had been broken for 3 months, Audrey reached for the door handle. Wait. She stopped. Rafferty was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite name. Not the measuring look, something more deliberate. Your brother's third surgery, he said. The one that's complicated. What does complicated mean, specifically? The air in the car changed. Why are you asking me that? Because I'd like to know you'd like to. Audrey turned to face him fully. Mr. Cole, I don't know what tonight was. I'm grateful, genuinely. But that was, I work at the place where you have dinner. You defended me from your girlfriends. She wasn't my girlfriend, your whatever. My former associate's daughter, he said. Someone I should have cut ties with 8 months ago and didn't, out of an overcomplicated sense of professional courtesy. He paused. It won't happen again. Audrey stared at him. Okay, well, the surgery, he said. Tell me. She didn't know why she did. Maybe she was tired. Maybe it was the car, the dark, the strange intimacy of two people suspended between one world and another. Maybe it was just that she had been carrying it alone for so long that her body had simply decided it was done. The waiting list for the specialist he needs is 14 months, she said. 14 months from the initial consult. He doesn't have 14 months. His cardiologist says his valve is deteriorating faster than projected. There's a surgeon in Boston, Dr. Amara Solis, who has an experimental approach, a minimally invasive repair instead of a full replacement. His odds are significantly better with her, but she's not covered by our insurance. She stopped. Her hands were pressed flat on her thighs. The out-of-pocket estimate is $68,000. I have $4,000 saved. I have a credit card with an $1,800 limit and a loan application that was denied last month. So, she exhaled. That's what complicated means. Rafferty was quiet for a moment. Then, how do you know about Dr. Solis? I spent 3 months researching every cardiac surgeon in the Northeast who's published on minimally invasive valve repair in the last 5 years. She said it without heat. It was just the truth. I'm very thorough when it matters. He was watching her again, that deep, unreadable attention. I believe that, he said. She pushed the door open and got out. She was almost to the building's front steps before she heard him. Audrey, she turned. He was leaning across the seat, looking at her through the open door, the city light catching the angles of his face. He held out a card. Small, black, just a number embossed in silver. I'd like to speak with you tomorrow, he said. 11 o'clock, my office. She looked at the card. Why? Because I have a proposition that would solve your problem, he said, and one that you will probably hate. But you'll hear it anyway. She took the card before she could think about it. She stood on the pavement after the car pulled away, holding a square of black cardstock in a neighborhood where she'd lived for 4 years, and felt with absolute certainty that something had just shifted irrevocably. She didn't know if it was good. She suspected it wasn't simple. She went upstairs. Danny was asleep in the second bedroom, which was a mercy. She stood in the doorway for a moment, watching the rise and fall of his chest in the lamplight. He was 19 and built like he should be playing pickup basketball on Saturday afternoons, not spending them in cardiology waiting rooms. She had a picture from 3 years ago, before the second surgery, where he was grinning at the camera with a watermelon slice in each hand at some barbecue. She kept it on her phone's lock screen. She looked at it most mornings. She went to the kitchen. She filled a glass with water and didn't drink it. She turned the black card over in her fingers. She was still there at 1 in the morning. She called the number. It rang once, Mrs. Sinclair. His voice was exactly as it had been in the car. Clear, unhurried, like he'd been awake and waiting. You knew I'd call, she said. It wasn't a question. I hoped, he said, which was different and surprised her. What's the proposition? A short pause. It's better explained in person. Give me the short version. Another pause, and she had the sense of a man accustomed to controlling the terms of every conversation, deciding once to give ground. I need someone to play a role, he said, for a period of time, publicly. Someone who has no prior connection to my world, no incentive to perform, and every reason to be convincing. He paused. In exchange, I will cover Danny's surgery, the full cost, Dr. Solis, Boston, whenever she can take him. Audrey gripped the counter. What role? She said flatly. My fiancé, Rafferty said. The silence that followed lasted a long time. You're serious, she said finally. I'm always serious. You want me to. We have met once. You don't know me. I don't know you. That's actually part of why it works. His voice was measured, thoughtful, like he was explaining something he'd already worked out thoroughly. The people in my world expect a certain kind of woman in this position. Someone strategic, polished, placed. What they won't expect is someone real, someone who looks at me the way you do. How do I look at you? Like, you're not afraid of me, he said. But you're not impressed by me either. It's extremely unusual, and it's exactly what I need right now. She let out a breath that was almost a laugh and didn't quite get there. You're the most unsettling person I've ever met. Probably, he agreed. 11 o'clock. Come and hear the terms. If you say no, you say no, and that's the end of it." She looked at the empty antiseptic bottle under the sink. She thought about Danny's appointment on Thursday. She thought about the letter from the hospital billing department that she'd put in a kitchen drawer 3 weeks ago and hadn't opened since. "I'll be there," she said. She hung up. She sat on the kitchen floor with her back against the cabinet. She was in her coffee-stained uniform and her worn flats, and she had just agreed to walk into the office of a man she didn't know to hear a proposal she was almost certainly going to agree to, because the alternative was watching her brother's valve deteriorate for 14 months while she waited for a miracle that wasn't coming. She had never thought of herself as someone who made deals with complicated men, but she also hadn't thought she'd still be fighting this hard at 27 and losing this slowly. The world didn't always give you the choices you wanted. Sometimes it gave you the choices that were left. The next morning she told Danny she had a job interview for a personal assistant position. He was still in bed, propped against 3 pillows, watching something on his laptop. He muted it to look at her. "Personal assistant?" He raised an eyebrow. "To who?" "A businessman," she said. "Finance type, Audrey." He said her name the way he'd been saying it since he was 12, with the particular tone of a younger sibling who has clocked something their older sister thinks they've hidden. "What's going on?" "Nothing," she said. "Eat your breakfast." "I made oatmeal. There's something you're not telling me. There's always something I'm not telling you. That's called being an adult." He threw a pillow at her. She caught it. She kissed his forehead, the way she'd done every single morning since the first surgery, and left before he could ask anything else. The Cole Group occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower in Midtown that had clearly been designed by someone who wanted you to feel, upon entering, that you were already being assessed. The lobby was cool and spare. The receptionist directed her to a private elevator that required a card key. She rode it to the top. The office that opened around her was not what she'd expected. She'd expected trophies, plaques and tombstones and the paraphernalia of a man measuring his own importance. Instead, the space was functionally enormous and almost aggressively undecorated. The view was spectacular. Rafferty Cole sat behind a desk of matte black steel, on a phone call in clipped, precise English, and raised one finger at her without looking up. She sat across from him and folded her hands and looked out at the city while he finished. She'd dressed carefully this morning, her best blouse, dark slacks, flats that weren't visibly worn, and had felt, walking up to the building, adequately put together. In this room, she felt like a library book that had been shelved in the wrong section. He hung up. He looked at her the way he had in the restaurant, in the car, in the doctor's office, that full, calm, analytical attention that somehow managed to be both impersonal and deeply focused. "You came," he said. "I said I would." He set a folder on the desk and slid it toward her. "The agreement." She opened it. Cohabitation and Representation Agreement was printed at the top in a font that meant business. Her eyes moved quickly through the language, passing faster than she usually admitted she could read legal text. Party B agrees to represent herself publicly as the fiancé of Party A in all contexts deemed necessary by Party A. Party B shall reside at the primary residence of Party A. Full discretion is required regarding the nature of this arrangement, enforced by the attached non-disclosure clause. Duration of agreement, 12 months from date of execution. In exchange, Party A agrees to fund in full the surgical and medical expenses of Daniel Sinclair, including but not limited to the procedure, specialist fees, rehabilitation, and any follow-up care deemed necessary by the attending physician. She closed the folder. "Why?" she asked. He leaned back in his chair. "Why does this serve me?" "Yes." He looked at her for a moment, then said with what she was beginning to recognize as his version of candor, "There are people who believe that a man without an anchor can be moved. I have spent 3 years being perceived as someone without stakes. That perception is becoming a liability. You want people to think you have something to lose. I want people to know it." He paused. "You in particular." She looked up from the folder. "Me? You looked at me last night when I was holding the most powerful card in the room," he said, "and you were not grateful and you were not afraid and you were not impressed. You were just real. That is not something I can manufacture." He held her gaze. "I can manufacture a lot of things, Miss Sinclair. I cannot manufacture that." She looked at the folder. She thought about what she was agreeing to. Living in a stranger's house, wearing his name, attending his events, standing in his world, pretending to be someone she wasn't for 12 months, while the most dangerous and important thing in her life got a fighting chance. She thought about Danny at 19, telling her once, in a hospital room after the second surgery, that he was sorry for being expensive, that he thought she should just let him be. She had held his hand until he fell asleep, and then she'd cried in the hallway for 10 minutes, and then she had gone back in, and she had not at any point entertained the possibility he was right. She picked up the pen. "There are conditions," she said. Something shifted in his expression. "Not surprise. Recalibration. Name. Danny's surgery is scheduled within the month. Not after I sign. Before. I need to know it's happening before I agree to anything. Reasonable," he said. "Done. I keep my phone and my privacy. I'm not monitored." She set the pen down. "When this is over, in 12 months, it's over completely. No extensions, no renegotiations. I walk away." He studied her. "Also agreed." She picked the pen back up. Her hand was steady. She thought that was worth noting to herself privately. Her hand was completely steady. She signed. He was already on his phone before the ink was dry, and she heard him say in a tone that admitted no ambiguity, "Get me Amara Solis's office in Boston. Today." Yes, today. The apartment he kept in Manhattan was on the 42nd floor of a building in Tribeca, a fact she registered from the elevator panel and filed away. The apartment itself was large and quiet, and looked like someone had carefully removed anything personal from it, leaving only the evidence of excellent taste. The housekeeper, a composed woman named Bet, who had the air of someone who had signed her own NDA long ago and was entirely at peace with it, showed her to a guest suite at the far end of a hallway. "Mr. Cole is rarely here before 9, Bet said. "He keeps early hours. You'll have the kitchen to yourself most mornings." She paused. "He's not an unkind man," she added. It sounded like something she'd said before to other people for similar reasons. That night, alone in a room with thread count sheets and a view of the Hudson, Audrey called Danny. "How'd the interview go?" he asked. "I got the position," she said. "Yeah." She could hear him smiling. She looked out at the water. "Complicated," she said. "He's very complicated." She was 3 days into the arrangement, still adjusting to the geography of someone else's life, when Rafferty came home at 11:30 on a Wednesday night with blood on his cuff and a quiet, tightly controlled energy that she now understood was the way he looked when something had gone badly but not catastrophically. She was at the kitchen counter with a glass of water and a cardiology research paper she'd been reading since 9. He stopped when he saw her. "You're up?" "Couldn't sleep." He set his jacket over the back of his chair and she saw the cuff clearly. Not a lot of blood, but real, dark, and dried at the edge. He was moving carefully in a way that said it wasn't only the cuff. "You're hurt," she said. "It's minor, Rafferty." He looked at her. It was the first time she'd used his first name and she hadn't planned it. It had simply come out, the same way she would have spoken to Danny. He set his briefcase down. He sat at the counter, which was as much an admission as she was going to get. She went to the cabinet under the sink where she'd already, out of long habit, catalogued the location of the first aid kit. He'd taken a cut along the inside of his forearm. Not deep, not dangerous, but ugly in the way that cuts from something sharp and fast always are. She cleaned it without commentary. He watched her work with the same focused attention he turned on everything. "You've done this before," he said. "My brother's had 2 open heart surgeries and 1 emergency procedure," she said. "I've learned to be useful when things go wrong." She secured the last strip of tape. "What happened?" A pause. "Business," he said. "What kind of business involves? The kind I'll tell you about eventually." He looked at her. "Not tonight." She sat back. They were close. The counter was narrow, and in the kitchen light he looked less like the version of himself that he presented to the world. Less constructed, more actual. The exhaustion in his face was real. "Thank you," he said. "I'm holding up my end," she said. "That's not why I'm thanking you." She looked at him. He looked at her. Something in the room had shifted, subtly but definitively, and she was not going to acknowledge it tonight, not because she didn't notice it, but because she was smarter than that. She gathered the used gauze into the trash. "Dr. Solis's office called this afternoon," she said. "Danny's pre-op is scheduled for the 17th. Something moved across Rafferty's face that she hadn't seen there before. "Good," he said, quietly, like the word meant more than one thing. He asked how I afforded it, she said. I told him my employer had exceptional benefits. He almost smiled. It was a near thing, close enough that she counted it. "Get some sleep," he said. "You too." She was in the hallway when she heard him. "Audrey," she stopped. "There are people who are going to try to use you to get to me," he said. "Starting next week, when this becomes public. People who are going to be very kind to you and very interested in you and very curious about what you know." She turned. "How will I know who they are?" she asked. He looked at her across the length of the kitchen, tired and precise and, she thought, genuinely concerned in a way he didn't have a comfortable language for. "They'll be the ones who seem too easy," he said. "The ones who give before they take. Trust the difficult ones. The ones who push back." He paused. "The ones like you." She went to her room. She lay on her back in the dark for a long time. She was not falling for him. She was clear on that. She was a woman who had made a transaction for the best possible reason. and she was going to see it through for 12 months. And at the end of it, Danny would be healthy, and she would walk away, and whatever had happened in that kitchen at 11:30 on a Wednesday would stay exactly where it was. She was very clear. She turned onto her side and looked out at the river, where lights moved on the water like something that couldn't make up its mind about where it was going, and she thought, 12 months. That's all. You know what you're doing. But somewhere in the building, in the room down the hall, Rafferty Cole was sitting in the dark, too. And she knew, with the particular instinct of someone who had spent years reading rooms and people and the things they don't say, that he was not thinking about the business. He was thinking about her, and the most unsettling part wasn't that she knew it, it was that she didn't entirely mind. Who is Rafferty Cole, really? And why does he actually need her? Is the cut on his arm really just business? And what happens when 12 months starts to feel like not nearly enough? If this story has you hooked, hit like right now, it tells me to write the next chapter faster. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss part 2. And tell me in the comments, do you think Audrey should trust Rafferty, or is she walking straight into something she can't walk back from? Drop trust or run below. I'll see you in the next chapter.